this is the pattern we're going to do together this week. It's a Simplicity 1463. It's currently available. I'm going to be doing this view. This is the fabric that I'm sewing. It's from JoAnn Fabrics. It is a knit. And this actually is a knit that stretches in both directions. You just need it to stretch across. So here's our selvage edge. You need to stretch this direction. This one happens to stretch both, but as long as it stretches this way, that's what you need to make this pattern. I'm doing the largest size, and for the largest size for view A, here it is, top. In knits are almost always 60-inch if it's a regular, if it's not like a ribbing. And for this size, for my size, you need 1 3/4. If you're making the smallest size, you would need 1 5/8. So it's pretty much the same fabric no matter what size you're using. I bought 2 1/4 yards because when I bought the fabric, I wasn't sure which I was doing. So I always buy a little extra. And I also buy extra because I usually like to lengthen my tops. I almost always want my top longer than the pattern, which I did do. And you'll see that here in just a minute. So if you want to make the same pattern, it is pattern 1463 by Simplicity. We're doing view A. The entire pattern from prep time, prep, cutting, and sewing and hemming, the whole thing takes about an hour total. This is a super fast and easy project. And I just want to show you when you're sewing with knits stretch, just as a reminder. Any knit pattern is going to have this thing on the back, and it actually is to make sure that you get the right amount of stretch. Some fabrics, it can always stretch more, or almost always. Let me get a little end down here. All right, so if you take this, if we hold this not stretched, this isn't being stretched, and I hold it like this, they're saying if I hold this end and I take this edge and I pull it, it should stretch at least this far. So we're going to see if ours does, and it does. This one is actually so stretchy it stretches in both directions. So we know this one's going to work great. This is a cotton with a tiny bit of spandex in it. Super soft, fast, and easy. So this is the pattern we're working with. I'm going to show you laying out and cutting next, and then on to sewing. So I'm laying out my pattern on my fabric, and this pattern goes on the fold like this, but it's nice and wide, see? But the problem I'm having is the fold has sort of a permanent crease in it from being on the bolt. So because of how it was also on the bolt, can you see that I actually have room to bring this over? So I'm going to refold this so that I don't have a center front line down my body. It may be slightly offset, but I think I would prefer that to having it straight down the center of my body. So I'm going to refold my fabric and lay this out. All right, so you can see here's the kind of the permanent crease that's in there. That may, with a washing and a pressing, completely come out because I'm working with knit. I'm not going to wash it prior to cutting, especially something as soft as this. You can see it already just wants to roll up. So now I'm going to go ahead and lay out and cut. Okay, so I was editing the video and I realized that I am missing footage. I don't have it, it's not there. So I'm just going to do a little intro to what's coming up. I wanted to add 2 inches to the hem on the front and the back, and I just measured down with my ruler 2 inches and marked along the hemline on both pieces, and I did it with tailor's chalk first. However, because of the stretchy nature or so forth, it just didn't work, so I went ahead and used pencil. So that's the intro to what you're about to see. Don't know how well you can see. I started marking with my yellow. This stretches so easily when you're marking, and it was just difficult to see the yellow, so I actually got a pencil and made a fine line. It's my cutting line, and it's gonna all disappear anyway, so I'm just using a plain little pencil to mark that. Now, because it's so easy to make a mistake and cut along your pattern instead of along my new line that I've marked, because I didn't add it, anything to the pattern, I didn't tape down the tissue. The first cut I'm going to make is actually starting down here. I'm going to start here and then true up, and that will help me not make the mistake of cutting with the original pattern instead of with my alteration. cut out with my hem added, and then I've got a couple pieces of my bigger scraps for doing my testing of my stitches on. I'm ready to sew. All right, I'm getting ready to pin my front to my back, but I wanted to see if I could get that permanent crease from the bolt out. Here you can see this is the back of the shirt, and there's the crease running all the way down. It's pretty obvious. So here's the front, and you can't see it. I just took it to the iron and gave it a quick press, and it came out pretty good. There's a slight shadowing. I can see just slightly, but it's very minimal. I think with washing, drying, and pressing, we're not gonna have to worry about that. So let me show you how it looks pinned together. All right, I have half of it pinned together. This is my shoulder seam. So I'm going to be stitching the shoulder seam. When I stitch, I want to make sure those stay together. This is the opening for the arm, so that is not stitched. And then here's the side seam. All right, so we're doing that on both sides. This is going to be super fast. I want you to see that the pattern has, if I flip this over, the back of the shirt in the armhole here is a little bit larger than the front of the shirt, and that's intentional. That's just wearing the ease. We need a little more usually across our shoulder and the back. So that's purposeful, and it changes nothing in the sewing. So don't worry about that if you're putting these together and this does not lay completely flat in here. This does not sew to this. This is open. This is where our arm goes through, and it's supposed to be that way. I'm sewing with the front of the shirt on top, right sides together. I'm just going to go all the way around. I'm doing both shoulder seams, and then I'm going to go back and get the side seams. Okay, literally took 5 minutes at the serger to sew up both side seams and the shoulder seam. And I just did a 3-thread. I prefer a 4-thread, but I'm going to tell you we are during quarantine and I only have 3 white cones left. I couldn't do a 4th thread because I just don't have it. So this is what the 3-thread looks like. You can see how nice and stretchy it is. If you are sewing on a sewing machine and not a serger, you're going to just sew a small zigzag. This is the cuff or the sleeve band, pattern piece 5. And what we're going to do is we're just going to, this is what it looks like. Okay, and can you see these 2 little notches? Those notches mean you fold towards each other, and we're going to sew along that edge. So that's what I'm going to do with my 2 cuffs, one for each sleeve, or band, as the pattern piece says. So we're going to fold these right sides together, and you can mark those notches if it helps you. So it's going to look like that. Put a couple pins in it, and we're just going to sew just that edge next. Here are the 2 bands folded, and make sure you fold it the correct direction. Look at your pattern. If you fold it the wrong direction, the band won't stretch to fit around your arm and to fit on the sleeve. So now we're going to just sew just this one little straight edge on both bands. Remember not to pull or stretch at the sewing machine. You can see that lays nice and flat. If you pull or stretch, this will get wide and wavy, which we don't want. So here's our little band, right sides together. We've made a tube. Now we're going to fold that tube in half. We're actually going to fold it around like this so that it's self-facing. So this is what the little tube is going to look like. We're going to put our raw edges together. And this little band is going to go on the end of our sleeve. See that? And that's what you're going to see. So it's going to be self-faced. It's going to look good on both sides. And we're going to do that to both pieces. And I would encourage you, when you go to fold this, make sure on the inside that these 2 fold the same direction. You don't want it to flip. If that flips, this seam is going to flip on the inside and be bulky. So I want to make sure they are going the same direction, and I'm going to pin those down. Here's one pin, so I've just got all my raw edges together. And that's how it looks. And then we're going to take this piece to the sleeve. So here's our sleeve. and the band is smaller than the sleeve opening. So your band circle is smaller than your sleeve circle, and you want to put the seam that we have one seam in our band, and we want that to be in the underarm. So I'm going to put the right side of the band, and it's either side is right side because it's folded in half, to the right side of my shirt. So the band's going to kind of slip down on the inside of the armhole like this. Like that. Okay, so we're going to match up all the seams underneath first. So there's my underarm seam, and then I'm going to just pull this taut. So here's the other end of that band, and I'm going to match it to my shoulder seam. Like this. Making sure all of my raw edges, my cut edges are together. All right, so that's kind of how it looks right now. You can see the shirt is bigger than the band, and when we go to sew this, we'll actually stretch the band to match the shirt. We aren't going to stretch the shirt at all, only the band. So we're going to stretch them to match. This is how ribbing is done, anything like that. So I'm going to actually stretch it even to pin it. So I'm going to stretch just a little bit, match up my raw edges, grab the pin that's in there, stick it in. Do the same thing right here. Make sure all my raw edges line up, and I don't have a pin. All right, here's one pinned. I'm just going to hold it up so you can see. You can see the excess on this shirt side. The band is tighter, and then when we stretch it to sew, we just stretch enough to make them even. That's how much we're going to stretch it to sew. And so here's one ready to go on. I'll get the other one prepped and then I'll show you. So we're putting underneath the foot here all of these layers. We're going to lay it down as flat as we can get it. And this is why I always pin with my pin heads this direction. It just makes it easier. You can raise your foot like that. And remember, we're stretching just enough to get the sleeve and the band to match. So I'm going to grab this where this next pin is, and you can see the fullness right here. I'm going to just take a couple stitches with my hand wheel to get the needles down in the fabric so that it's holding my fabric down. The presser foot is down. And now I'm just going to gently pull. I'm going to hold this so you can kind of see. There's my excess sleeve. That's all the pulling. I don't want to pull to make the shirt itself stretch, only the band. So that's it. And then as I get close to that pin, I'll roll this forward. Make sure that it's completely smooth. I don't have any buckles. Pull out that pin. We're going to make sure all 3 layers are lined up. There's my thread tails, which I'm not worried about because the machine will cut them off since I'm serging. It just keeps going around. You can always stop. You don't have to, once the machine's going, you don't have to keep going. It's just like driving a car. You see a problem, you take your foot off that pedal. And we're almost all the way around, making sure all my edges match up. Make sure you get those pins out when you're at your overlock machine, your serger. You sure don't want to serge through a pin. So I'm all the way around, and then I'm going to just pull this out. So this is what it looks like on the inside. Here's the sleeve, here's the band. And then let me flip this around and show you on the right side. So now, look at that. Here's the shirt, here's the band. And it makes a nice little shape. Doesn't that look good? Let me pull that flat. There you go. See, and there's no, if you look at this, see, there's no gathers. It's on there completely smoothly. All right, we're going to do the other sleeve. Wasn't that easy? All right, both sleeves are done, and before I go on to do my neck facing, I'm just going to finish my hemline. Again, not stretching at all, just letting the machine feed it through on its own, and just finishing off so I have a nice finished edge for my hem. All right, next is the facing. We have two facing pieces. I've already taken them off, a front and a back, and we just have one of each, and we're going to marry the two to each other. So we're going to take right sides together, put the front to the back. This is going to be the shoulder seam. This is going to match up to the shoulder seam, so we're going to serge that edge, and then we're going to flip this over and match up these two edges. And we're just going to stitch these real quick, just this short little edge. So I'm going to stitch this one and this one. All right, here's my little neck facing stitched together. Back is smaller than the front, and the next thing we're going to do, that's why we're at the ironing board, is I'm just going to press down this seam carefully. Again, not stretching anything, just to make it nice and flat. Whoops, sorry about that. Just made an earthquake on the camera. Nice and flat. And then this is going to fold in half lengthwise. So we're going to fold seam to seam like this. Buried my pins. So kind of like the sleeve band was, that's the way the neckband is going to be. Folding in half, and then I am going to give this a little press. So it's going to be in half like this, and this is what's going to get stitched to our neckline. All right, so we're going to do that all the way around, and then we're going to press it. And when pressing, make sure you don't press over your pin heads. So we're just going to gently press it in half like this, so that's nice and flat all the way around, and then we're going to go attach it to our shirt. All right, so it's pressed in half. I've got my shoulder seams, which are easy to see because there's a seam there, and then I've marked my center front and my center back on the band and on my top. So now we're going to put the two pieces together. So we're going to start, here's the back, it's smaller, and here's the back of my blouse. So right sides together like this. We're going to just match up seam to seam and pin it. Make sure our seams are going the right direction. Seams should go towards the back. Boop. Okay, and then here's my center back, and here's my center back pin. Make sure, see how mine's flipping? We want to make sure it stays nice and flat. Center back to center back. I don't know if you can hear it, but I can hear ukulele. Some bunny upstairs is playing the ukulele, one of my kiddos. All right, next shoulder seam. Again, right sides together. And I haven't worried about my tails too much because I know my serger's going to get it. And now, here's my center front. Here's my center front, again, making sure my band isn't flipped. It's nice and flat. Center front to center front. And the front is so large, I'm going to put more pins in it than just this one, just to keep my layers nice. And again, the band is a little bit smaller than the shirt, so we're going to stretch it just enough, stretch the band just enough to make it meet the shirt, but don't stretch the shirt. And the band on the neck does not have as much stretch as the band on the sleeve did. I like a little bit of stretch in that. I think it makes it lay flatter. You don't want a neckband that flips over on you. All right. Make sure I get this even. All right. We are now just going to go serge all the way around that neckline. When we're done, it's going to flip up like that, and that's our finished neck edge. So whenever I'm doing a neckline like this and I'm sewing on ribbing or a neckband, I always start in the back or at a shoulder seam, somewhere less obvious. You don't want to start and stop in the center front of your garment. As a rule, it's just going to be more noticeable, and it's right where everyone sees you. You want to hide it in the back or on a shoulder seam where it's much less noticeable. And again, there's not a lot of stretch in this, just a little bit. Want to make sure all of our layers are together. It's easy to get a little hole on something like this because one of the layers slips. So you just have to watch your layers as you go. All right, I've made full circle. Coming back around to where I started. That's how the neckband looks. Isn't that pretty? Okay, we're now going to go to the sewing machine and do the hem. So I have pressed up my hem. Like this. So that it makes it much easier when I go to the sewing machine. You can see, even with it not pinned, there's a little crease right there. So now I'm just going to go all the way around and straight stitch it. I have it set for about a 3.3 straight stitch because the hem is so big. I don't have to worry about it popping stitches. And again, you want to start either at the center back or a side seam. So here we are. Here's my hem. I pressed up 5/8 of an inch and I'm stitching on the 1/2 inch line. Remember, do not pull or stretch. I'm letting the machine feed it through. I'm just keeping it flat. And you can see it's not stretching or puckering at all on the hem.